Most of the Division 2 community has finally agreed to Striker being the best DPS build in the game, even though when the latest rework took place about a year ago, maybe even more, a lot of players had the opinion that Heartbreaker or a full red build was better. Now that most people agree on Striker being the best DPS build, we disagree about the best combination, what you should go with. Is the chess piece worth running? Should I use Vigilance, Obliterate and 4 Striker pieces? Memento or no Memento? These are all questions that I've seen in my videos being asked quite a lot of times on Reddit, on Twitter, Discord servers, everywhere. This is the debate that keeps on giving, so to say. In my opinion, these debates are meaningless unless you can get some more context. What do you want to use the build for? How good is your accuracy? Are you playing solo or not? What type of content are you trying to clear? All these are questions that really matter and put the comparison into perspective. In this video, I will go over the 3 Striker builds that I've been using over the past year and try to explain and help new players understand how and when to use each Striker build. Before we get into the 3 builds, we need to understand how Striker works and how to use it to its fullest. Striker's 4-piece talent offers 0.65% increased weapon damage for every stack. You gain 1 stack for every time you hit an enemy, with a maximum amount of 100 stacks. You can increase the maximum amount of stacks if you use the Striker chess piece, which raises the maximum amount of stacks to 200. You can also increase the damage you get with each stack from 0.65% to 1% if you use the Striker backpack. You lose 1 stack per second when you have less than 50 stacks, you lose 2 stacks per second when you have more than 50 stacks but less than 100, and last, you lose 3 stacks per second when you have more than 100 stacks. So Striker is offering you very high damage as long as you're accurate and as long as you can maintain a high number of stacks. Now, depending on the situation you're in, but also your personal ability to be accurate, you will either benefit greatly from, let's say, using the full Striker build, which includes 4 Striker pieces and 2 of them being the chess piece and the backpack, or you will fail miserably to maintain a high number of stacks, and as a result, you will have lower damage, and it would have been better for you to use a normal full red build with branchlets or a Heartbreaker build, or maybe a different combination of Striker. So the first and most obvious Striker build would be for players who have good accuracy, but also face content that gives them enough time and enough enemies to reach the max stacks. For this build, we will need 4 Striker pieces, of course, and 2 of them being the backpack and the chess piece. The other 2 could be whatever you like, as long as the 2 branched pieces that you're going with is 1 Grupo Sombra for the 15% critical hit damage and 1 Chesca Vairoba for the 10% critical hit chance. All these items have to be full red. All my core attributes are weapon damage and all the rest of the attributes are critical hit chance and critical hit damage. With my 3 gear mods being 12% critical hit damage, I reach a total of 52% critical hit chance and 188% critical hit damage. As you can see from the gameplay in the background, this build, when used in the right environment, will make it very easy to maintain all your stacks and you will benefit greatly from it. Now, some of you might ask why the Fox Sprayers. I used to run the Fox Sprayers instead of a Chesca Vairoba piece because of the 8% damage targets out of cover. However, we're losing out on critical hit damage. And after a lot of testing and after a lot of people commented on it on my videos, I decided to give it a shot and it turns out that I was wrong. Fox Sprayers is not the best in piece item, Chesca Vairoba and Grupo Sombra are. The Chesca Vairoba gives me 16% critical hit chance and 12% critical hit damage in total, allowing me to invest all my gear mods on critical hit damage. So that's another 36% critical hit damage. If I change that Chesca Vairoba piece to a Fox Sprayers, I will lose 10% critical hit chance and 12% critical hit damage, assuming the roll of my Fox Sprayers is 6% critical hit chance. So I would need to get another 10% critical hit chance from somewhere. So that's another 2 gear mod slots that now I will have to remove from critical hit damage in order to get critical hit chance. So that makes a total loss of 36% critical hit damage. 8% damage targets out of cover is a multiplicative bonus. Critical hit damage is not, so theoretically, if you had 10% critical hit damage and 10% damage targets out of cover, the damage targets out of cover is better. However, because of the way the rolls work in the game, we don't have that kind of comparison here. In order to get that Fox Burst in the build, we would be losing out on a lot of critical hit chance or critical hit damage. Moving on to the second build, this build is for content that is easy and fast to clear. For example, control points, or group activities, or countdown, where most of the NPCs will die relatively fast. Even if you have named enemies, they're not that tanky, so you take them down pretty fast, even if you're solo or in a group. Most of the solo content, except solo legendaries that I've been using this build, which, as I just said, is also great for group activities where fights are not a DPS check. So let's take a look at the build. 4 pieces of striker, but this time not including the chest piece. We have the backpack, gloves, mask, and holster. Obviously, you can get the knee pads in there instead of the holster. Doesn't really matter. What matters at the end of the day is that you need 4 pieces of striker, including the backpack but not the chest piece, 1 Chesca Vairoba piece, and 1 Grupo Sombra piece. One of these 2 has to be the chest piece, and it has to be with either Obliterate or Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon will offer you higher damage, however, it will also reduce your survivability by a lot. It goes without saying, once again, everything full red, just like before, with all the attributes being the same. Critical hit damage and critical hit chance. Core attributes, weapon damage, and my stats are exactly the same as the previous build. 52% critical hit chance and 188% critical hit damage. The idea behind this build is because, like we just said, we're going over content where enemies are not as tanky as the incursion bosses or legendary bosses. The encounter will be over before we can reach those 200 stacks, especially if we're playing on a group, so the striker chest piece is not being used to its fullest. That's why we go with the Obliterate talent, which will be maxed out much faster and will give us 25% increased total weapon damage as soon as we reach 25 stacks, which should be pretty fast simply because we're sitting at 52% critical hit chance. You can use this build on solo heroic content as well as on legendary group content and you will do great. The only difference between the first and the second build when it comes to which one you should be using during group legendary activities is how accurate you are and how good your team is. If you have 4 DPS builds in your team, chances are that you won't be able to reach, the full stacks on striker if you're going with the first build. So we're changing to the second one. If you have 1 tank, 1 healer and just 2 DPS on your build, chances are you will have enough time to reach max stacks when you're using the chest piece, so you should be going with the first build. Now, a lot of people are going to ask why not the Coyote Mask on any of these 2 builds. It's true that the Coyote Mask is better than a Chesca or a Grupo piece, and theoretically you will get a little bit more damage if you run it, but because almost everyone else uses it, I'm used to getting the buff from others, so I don't want to waste a slot by equipping it as well. However, if you find yourself not having maxed out attributes, if you find yourself not having 6% critical hit chance on all your pieces, and you have like 4 or 5 or whatever, and you have less than 50% critical hit chance, I would recommend you to change the Chesca Vairoba piece for the Coyote Mask. Depends on which one gives you better numbers. The third and the final striker build is my go-to solo legendary build. It's not so heavily focused on doing as much damage as possible, but rather having a great balance between survivability and damage output. It's the build I recently used to clear title basing on legendary all by myself, and the build I have used to clear all the other legendaries except the Manning National Zoo, which I haven't attempted yet and I will be doing tonight. Because of the nature of the content that we're trying to clear with this build, which as I said is solo legendary missions, we will be using 4 pieces of striker, including the chest piece this time. We will be able to reach 200 stacks for most encounters, and we need that 130% increased total weapon damage to make up for the fewer red cores we're using. Personally, I found the 3 blue cores and 4 red cores recipe to be ideal for me and my playstyle. As you can see, We're missing the striker backpack because Memento is more beneficial for our goal here, which of course is having some survivability as well. Memento comes with all 3 core attributes and 2 very strong buffs. The long-term buff: for every Memento trophy we collect, we gain a small percentage of weapon damage and skill efficiency, as well as armor generation. When we eventually reach 30 stacks, which is the maximum, we will have 30% weapon damage, which translates to 2 red cores, 30% skill efficiency, which right now it's irrelevant because we're focusing on weapon damage builds, and 3% armor regeneration, which is the most important buff from the Memento in my opinion. The short-term buff will give us 20% weapon damage, 30% bonus armor, and 5% skill efficiency for 10 seconds every time we pick up a trophy. This short-term buff can be a lifesaver if you're getting pushed, if you're getting rushed by shotgunners, or if you're running out of armor kits and you end up being in a very bad situation because the enemies are pushing you. You can roll over, pick up a couple of trophies, and you have a bunch of bonus armor, 20% extra weapon damage for the 10 seconds, which will help you survive and keep on going. The last piece of the build is a Cheska by Roba brand set piece for the 10% critical hit chance. Of course, all my attributes once again are critical hit chance and critical hit damage maxed out, and we're reaching a total of 58% critical hit chance and 137% critical hit damage. Regarding the specializations, Survivalist, Firewall and Gunner are all great choices, with Gunner being my favorite, especially for the third build that we just went over. 10% armor on kill with increased rate of fire and armor regeneration has been a must-have for most of my solo legendary runs. Weapon-wise, the exotic St. Elmo's assault rifle remains the best option in my opinion, even though it's not the hardest hitting assault rifle per bullet. With a 70 round magazine and the shock bullets coming out of it, it's extremely useful. The shock bullets can delay the enemies from pushing you. They can save you from a very bad situation where you have no armor left. You're one shot from being dead. A shotgunner is rushing you, but he's not shooting at you because you end up shocking him. Overall, these 3 builds, and especially the first 2, are the builds the community considers to be the best. Someone might argue about the Coyote Mask missing, but as I said earlier, I mostly use this build in groups and there is always someone running the Coyote Mask, and that's why I don't have it, but feel free to change it out. Even if you play solo, it will only make your build a little bit stronger. The third build is also very known amongst the player base, but a lot of players do not attempt solo legendaries and are kinda sleeping on it. I really hope that you found the video helpful. If you did, leave a like and consider subscribing for more content. I also live stream every Friday and Saturday and maybe another day or 2 during the week. Thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, bye bye.